Okay, welcome to the QSO today, Elecraft KX line demo. I am Scott, aka 6Q of gemsproducts.com. I work with Elecraft and work many of their trade show booths, and so I'm back here doing it via the web. My co-host today is Doug, KC6ELN. Doug will be in the background and kind of interrupt here and help me out audio. He'll take your questions and feed them to me as we need. So welcome, Doug.
Thank you kindly, Scott. Welcome to our participants. Thank you for coming, gentlemen.
Yeah, so this is, as I said, part of the Elecraft booth. So we're going to talk about the entire KX line. Little background, I am in Colorado. That's where I grew up. I've recently retired, now I'm back here. And unfortunately, in my move, which is still occurring, I am missing a little bit of my equipment. So we're going to have to talk about the KXPA 100 amp and not be able to show it to you because I don't have it with me. But the other elements I do have with me, and we'll go over those. Kind of a brief outline for everybody. I'm going to give you some similarities and some differences of the two products, and then we'll go in depth with the KX3. If you have questions, by all means, put your questions in, and Doug will take those and get them back to me, and we'll get them answered up. Once we get through some Q&A at the end of the KX3, we'll shift over to the KX2, and we'll go more in depth to the KX2. I am an avid SOTA activator or summits on the air. So I do have a lot of field experience with both the KX3 and the KX2 in mountaintop activations. I know a lot of the folks out there are using them for parks on the air. A lot of folks use them for their home stations. So we'll kind of go into each of those elements a little bit and see what we can do. So let's start off with, show you both of the products here real quick. Here is a KX3 and here is a KX2. And you can see they're similar. They're both HF radios. And then we'll go into some of the others. Obviously, the KX2 is a little smaller. The KX3 is a little bigger. But the displays are the exact same display between both radios. They both have a large VFO-A knob. And then you'll notice some smaller knobs. And there's less on the KX2, more on the KX3. We'll kind of go in depth to that. So the KX2 down. We'll kind of go over some of this. You might notice the raised end panels, the heat sink are a little different than a factory radio. This is my personal radio, and I will go over what these are and kind of how they work first, get them out of the way, and then we'll go a little more in depth to the radio. So the products I make at gemsproducts.com are called SideKX. That is these raised end panels. Your factory end panel will end right here at the end of the radio, and you'll take those off and you'll replace them with my end panels. What my end panels do are kind of a two-level deal. First is the handles that you can grab. They're on here real solid. That, if your radio were to fall over, it's going to protect the front end. As you can see, it protects those knobs. This is the cover. It is a polycarbonate material. The polycarbonate is a great material for what I'm using it for here because it is flexible. Notice it didn't crack. It's durable. The pitfalls to polycarbonate is it scratches a little easier, but the attributes of it being non-fragile where you can bend it way outweigh a little bit of scratching that you may get from use. So anyway, the way the cover works is on your KX3, you engage one end first, set it in so that this end is down in those end panels. Also on the end here, you will see a raised panel on the plastic where it says SideKX. With that, that will engage here in this hole that's built into the handle. It's the design that I came up with. And anyway, when you push it down in, now it's locked on. Holding the cover and the whole radio's there. Same thing, cover doesn't fall off. So with that, you're able to fold the legs up, disconnect your peripherals on here, the antenna or your microphone or your key, whatever you have. This is ready to go in your backpack and it's protected. To take the cover off, same thing. push in on the lettering, lift up on one end, the cover comes right back off. I offer those products on the PX3, the KX3, and the KX2. So as we go through, I'll show you more of those. The heat sink that's on here, this is a product made by Pro Audio Engineering, Howard Hoyt out of South Carolina. And Howie and I have partnered on a couple of different ventures here. You'll see them on the KX2 more. But on here, if you look, you'll see a little notch cut right back here on this heat sink. And that allows for more mass in the heat sink, but the cover will still engage and go down in that slot and be out of the way. The other thing that's great about this heat sink is you'll notice the screw holes. This is not a heat sink that was from some computer or some other electronic market modified to fit on here. It was specifically machined to fit on here. And these fins are spaced such that those screws line up perfectly to help cool the power transformer, or power amplifiers, the PAs, which live right below this on the back side of the radio. Now, the heat sink, just a quick caveat on that is, really don't need a heat sink unless you're doing real high-end digital modes like the FT8 where there's a real high duty cycle. Then you're going to need it. If you're not doing those, really don't need a heat sink. The factory heat sink is sufficient for all of the CW, the phone, upper and lower side bands, AM, all of that. It works perfect. So anyway, to explain what you're seeing, just get them out of the way so you don't have questions on those. Doug, do we have any questions up to this point?
One of our sharp-eyed customers noticed that the VFO A knob on your KX2 has a dimple. I'd really like to know all about that because that's not Elecraft standard. That's Jim's products.
It is. Well, we'll switch over to that real quick. I'll just touch on it. We're going to go over this in more depth, but yes, this is a VFO A knob that has a dimple sticking out, a dimple sticking in, and a rubber tire to help facilitate tuning your VFO knob. That is a product that I do make. It is a press on or pull off and press on type deal. You remove the factory knob just by lifting it off. There are no set screws because your VFO A encoder has a plastic shaft on it. It's a lightweight unit to keep this radio down. And therefore, this is just an injection molded part. It weighs just slightly more than the factory knob. So hopefully that answered that for those folks.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, so we'll go back to the KX3. What this radio is it will cover 160 meters through 6 meters, all mode. And in doing that, you are also able, if you're looking on this end, this is your HF port, which is 160 through 6. And then this port here, the SMA connector, is for a VHF board. In the US market, that is a 2-meter board, or in the European market, it is a 4-meter board. With that option can be added at any point to this radio. Goes in with a few screws, and there's a connector for it picks up because it's a transverter, and it'll pick up the signal to work with, and at that point, you've got your SMA to get your signal out. The radio itself runs on 8 AA batteries internally, which if you push these 2 buttons here to turn it on, video comes live. And we'll go over those batteries here in just a second. With the internal batteries, you're going to get 10 watts out. That's about all those 8 AA's can muster. If you use external power, which you will plug in here, we'll go over all of these. The external power, you're able to get 12 watts out. I'm sorry, 15 watts out on this radio here. So external 15, internal is 10. Again, through the menus, you'll turn on the 2-meter or 4-meter module if you have that installed, and you'll have 2 or 4 meters at about 3.5 watts because it's a transverter. It's a little less power out, but it does work just fine for mountaintopping that I've used my 2-meter board. You'll also notice you've got a series of buttons across, and you've got the knobs here. Kind of zoom in a little bit here. How's that audio holding up, Doug?
Similar to yesterday, we can hear your clear tones about 80% of the time.
Okay, so you'll notice there's a white colored logo on each button. Then there's a yellow colored logo below the button, and then there is a white number associated with that as well. Each of these dials and buttons on here serves multiple purposes. So the white button, if you single press that real quick, that is the white button, whatever that function is labeled on there. Then if you need the yellow function on here, it's a long press or about a 1 second press. The third one being the number that's associated here. If you go into frequency, then you can type in the numeric frequency you want to go to by using those same buttons or knobs to get the digit that you're looking for. We'll open this up. I'll show you the radio does operate on 8 AA batteries. It's very easy to open the case. I'll show you what I did there. It's the 2 knurled nuts on this end and the same 2 knurled nuts on this end. And the case kind of is a clamshell. Make sure that they're loose. And the case clamshells in half. You'll notice there's a ribbon cable in here holding the 2 halves together. So you got to be a little careful with that. But there are the 8 AA batteries that are in here. Currently, I'm using rechargeable Duracell batteries that are a nickel metal hydride composition. With that, we'll go over the radio and some of the options as I put that back together. The base radio, as I said, is 160 meters through 6 meters all mode at 10 watts with internal power, and it does come with the battery holder for the AA batteries. You can use alkaline batteries and set that in the menu, or you can use the nickel metal hydride rechargeable batteries. Again, just go to the menu and tell it which battery you have, and the radio will operate just fine. So I guess the biggest option that I would steer people to is the internal option of the antenna tuner. It lives right inside the radio. It's seamless. You don't see it hanging off the outside. There's no magic you have to do to put it in. It's pretty basic. With that, it is a 9-to-1 tuner, and it tunes just about anything you want to attach to the radio to keep the radio happy. Now, obviously, you'd want to do your homework and use an antenna that radiates well as well, but the radio will be happy with the antenna tuner being a 9-to-1. It tunes up pretty much anything. The next option that's available inside the radio is going to be the KX I/O board. That gives you the rechargeable function on the nickel metal hydrides. So in your menu, you'll go in, you'll select battery, and you'll select a time slot of number of hours to charge those nickel metal hydrides, and they can be charged inside the radio. The other feature of the KX I/O board is that you get the real-time clock. So when the radio is powered off, it still keeps time. It uses a little few milliamps of current, keeps the clock set. When you turn the radio back on, the clock has got the correct time in it, and you're ready to use that on a mountaintop. So that's what the KX I/O board as an option does. The third option, internal, is the roofing filters. And those, again, just go straight in, the board that lives inside. You go into the menu, tell it you have that option installed, and now you can use those roofing filters. So that's pretty much it for inside the radio. On the outside of the radio, the option is for MH3 microphone, which this is the same microphone on the KX2 or the KX3. And the microphone has up and down frequency here, and then it's got the push to talk over here. And it's just a little stereo plug here that goes in. So that's the external side of it. Next, you'll notice there's a port on the bottom of the radio here, and this is called a KX-PD3. It is your iambic keyer, and this will plug right into the bottom, screw in, thumb screws. I'm not going to screw these all the way in. Just radio on. So now your radio's on, and you can key it here. Anyway, on this radio, the KX3 or KX-PD3 is what was built for this radio. And this radio came out first, probably about 9-10 years ago now. The KX2, when it came out, they made a smaller set of paddles that are called the KXPD2. These paddles will also work on this radio. They plug in exactly the same way with the thumb screws. Both paddles will work on here. So if you have a preference for one over the other one, they work seamlessly on here. There's two little legs that fold out of the back, right there and right here. So you can set it down on the desk at an angle, and there's still room for either of those keys to work just fine on here. We'll go to this end of the radio. So you've got your power connection here, which is 9 to 16 volts. Accessory 1, your key for an external keyer of your choice. Your headphones, your RX IQ, yep, I read that backwards, RX IQ out. That is for the pan adapter, which is another option I'll go over here in just a second, and your accessory port here. On this end, as we talked, is just your SMA and your BNC for your antennas. So those are the ports. And then this port here, I do make a paddle port cover that covers this. Some people are non-CW ops and want to cover that big square hole there to keep dust, dirt, and whatnot out of there. So I do make a little metal plate that screws on there. I don't have one on this radio today. The other option, cover, I make the end panels and the covers for all three of their products. It's the same cover, just a different size. Engages the same exact way. So your pan adapter.
Excuse me, Scott.
Yes.
The end panel covers that you make for the PX3, KX3, and KX2, are there any particular aspects that afford extra protection to the sockets or the antenna ports in addition to the unit that we see on the camera now?
In the KX2, yes. And I can show you that real quick. The base end panel is just flat on each end. However, I also make a heat sink end panel, and that, because it does have the raised fins, will offer protection for the BNC connector to some extent down at this end. You got to have enough room to get the connector on and twist it here. So as far as end panel protection, nothing other than what the factory end plate would offer. No.
Thank you kindly.
So on the pan adapter, what this is a color display. There are no batteries inside this currently offered. It requires external power. It has the same power port as the KX2 and the KX3. So we'll go over the batteries here in just a second on a KX2, and you can use the KX2 battery on this or on a KX3. On here, you're going to have your RX IQ out. That's to bring the signal from the radio in here for display. And then your accessory PC connection here is the one that's going to control change frequencies on the radio. It sends the data over here, and it tells you what frequency you're on the display here. In addition to that, you're also going to see the keyboard here, a USB connection. What the users as well as Elecraft have found is the more basic a keyboard, a wired keyboard is, so if it's just the standard alphanumeric keys on a keyboard without the 10 key on the far end of it, those work great. There's a list of them on the website that we have found to be acceptable, meaning they work, they don't have any issues. There have been some dongles put in, and those do work as well. With a few of them, again, you can look it up online and see which model might work for this. What that will allow you to do is on your display, this is a spectrum display, so you're going to get the up and downs that you're going to see. You're also going to get the waterfall trail coming down, so you can see where a signal may have disappeared, and there's an opening on that frequency where somebody has just vacated transmitting on. And you can use the cursor on here and go to that frequency by pushing the little knob down here. If you push this in one time, it will QSY the radio to the frequency where that cursor is, and now you'll be on that frequency, and you can have a QSO that way. There are markers. You can change heights, you can change spans. In addition, on your KX3 or KX2, the This will power back on. Right down here where it says stolen from AK6Q, that'd be me, by the way. That display will scroll by as it's decoding a digital transmission, whether it be CW or, for example, PSK31. That scrolls by, you get about 8 characters across, and you saw it went by fairly quick. So if you're using that to decode, for example, PSK31, then you get 8 characters worth of data going across there. You've got to remember what it is. You can use the CW key and key a response to that and hit transmit, and it'll can it up and it'll send it away. The pan adapter, if you have that plumbed in, you're going to get about, I think it's about 80 or 90 characters on here. And again, it will scroll across about 3 lines of it and fill it up, and then it starts over at the top. But you're still going to have all 3 lines displayed on here so you can read your message from that's being decoded. The other option is you're able to put the keyboard on here and you're able to type a response. When you type that response in, so your decoded message is white characters, your typed message is green characters, and when you hit enter on the keyboard, it'll turn those characters yellow because it canned them up and sent that data out as a transmission. So you're able to see all 3 of those functions going on at the same time on this display. It really doesn't weigh a lot because there's no batteries in it. As far as field use, I do take my KX3, my PX3, and the amplifier, which we'll go over here next, with me if I'm going to be, like, if I'm camping in a campground with my RV, or maybe going, to a local park. I can set up to run the amp takes a bigger battery. To run the display on the pan adapter really doesn't take a lot of battery. You can run a little set of AA's in a holder, or you can use the battery from the KX2 or a third-party vendor like BioNO or BuddyPool come to mind. Their battery packs work just fine and will power all of that as well. But when I backpack, I started with this radio here, the KX3, which is about the size of a red brick. It weighs just over 2 pounds with the battery in it, which if you're a backpacker, ounces are pounds and grams are ounces. And so everything adds up, which really led me into the KX2, which we'll go over next. The KX3, quick war story on it. I typically use an end-fed antenna. Maybe it's not a war story, a field story. I went to Hawaii, to Maui, and I did a SOTA activation of, it's called Red Mountain there, which is the Haleakala volcano. It's the tallest mountain in Maui at just about 14,000 feet. It's a drive-up summit, except for the last few yards to the very peak of the summit where you're going to operate, which qualifies for the SOTA activation. When I got up there, I had my radio, I had my antenna, but I was missing a length of coax with a little transformer that I use as a unun or a transformer, depends on who you talk to. It's a 64-to-1 is what I use. It's a little hand wound deal. I was missing that element. So when I got up there, what I ended up having to do is strip off some wire at the end to expose it, put the center of that into the center of the BNC, a little sliver of wood in here. But I did have my 2-meter whip with me, which is an expandable metal mast, and I laid that across as the counterpoise. This tuner being a 9-to-1 made the radio happy, and I was able to make contact all the way to New Zealand with that compromised antenna. Now, granted, I was at 13,000, almost 14,000 feet, and I was surrounded by salt water, which helped immensely that propagation. But I did make my my needed cues and got my SOTA activation done. So it was by the grace of the great antenna tuner that's in here and some quick thinking that got that pulled off. The antenna wire, you might see this here. This is just, it's either 26 or 28 gauge silver coated Teflon outside. It's kind of oily feeling or slick feeling. I put this up in trees. This here is a counterpoise. Actually, it's about 17 feet for the KX2. but I use this exact same wire for my infed in 27 and 54 feet. Depends on how much real estate I have put up on a mountaintop. Frequently, I operate here in Colorado. Most of my mountaintops are above timberline, so I take a push-up pole to get my antenna up high and run that down because there's no trees to throw these antennas up in. If I'm operating on a lower summit, I can put it up in a tree. That's even easier. Just throw it up in the tree. This stuff doesn't get up. So that's what this is. We'll go over this again when I get to the KX2. Another option that Elecraft offers is the binding post. So this connects to your radio here with the BNC. Red is your radiator wire, or the wire that you're going to try and get up on a push-up pole or onto a up in a tree. And the black wire is your counterpoise. 26 to 27 feet of any kind of wire off of this up, and about 16 feet, give or take a little bit here, and just lay that out on the ground. You have got an operating antenna, really simple and easy. This binding post, I think, is right around the $10 mark from Elecraft. And I carry one as a backup with me because I didn't have it that day. That would have helped simplify some of my connections instead of using a little stick of wood to hold my antenna in. So great to have that product as well. Another item that I do have, since we're still in the KX3, this is a cradle or a mounting bracket. And what it does is your radio will mount to this, and this will allow you to interface your radio to a mounting solution behind it. Mounting solution, the RAM products, RAM, Lido, Lido, or ProClip. And then there's a brand new company out, and I've not really played with too many of their products. I believe they're called G29. It's a carbon fiber kind of version of RAM products. Real high-end, really nice looking stuff. However, they all have a base, which is about this size. Excuse me. And the bolt pattern that you'll see here, this bolt pattern is called AMPS, AMPS. It is an industry standard that all of those vendors terminate some kind of mounting bracket into. Therefore, on this side, which is the inside here, we'll kind of see if I can get the glare just right here. Anyway, you can see a hex pattern where a nut will go in here. This is a 1032 nut or a 6mm nut for the European market for the metric system. Both will fit in here, and you'll put the bolt from this side through the mounting bracket of your choice, RAM, Lido, ProClip, or G29, and it'll thread into that nut and mount this. The way that you capture your radio is off of those knurled nuts on each end. It doesn't matter which end you start with, just capture two of them. On the other end, all you're going to do is just push it into place. What it'll do is it locks in. Now, the radio is firmly attached, whatever that mounting bracket is. To take it off is as simple as lifting two of these thumb tabs off with your thumb. Bracket comes free and the radio's back out of the bracket. Now, I have had some users tell me, hey, not only is it good for an automotive or a mobile type mount, but they're using them at home as well. I am extremely left-handed. Being left-handed, this is the normal configuration you will see the PX3 and the KX3 set up in. But being left-handed, I really prefer this setup. That's not real conducive unless you get some kind of bracket back here. I make the same mounting bracket for a PX3 as I do a KX3. And with the ball mount system, if you go to my website, you'll see a bunch of images of this. But the bottom line is it lets you adjust, get rid of glare. But not only can you adjust it that way, you can rotate it left, the bottom, the right, or to the top, and again, get rid of those. So those are mounting solutions. I also offer a similar mounting for the the KX2. So that kind of covers the KX3. We'll go over the KX2 next. Do we have any questions, Doug?
A couple. Thanks for giving us a moment. Any questions about getting to the website of gemsproducts.com If you can't get there directly, if you can't find a product, don't hesitate to contact me on Monday. Here's my email address: support@elecraft.com, SUPPORT @elecraft.com. We'll get you there. We had an individual who jumped right over to GEMS products looking for heat sinks. I'll be chatting with him on Monday. Don't hesitate to send us a line. You mentioned something about the KX3 2-meter module having about 3 watts of output. Does that power out change when you're running fully charged AA's or when you're using an external power source?
No, it does not. The 8 AA internal, whether they're the alkaline or the nickel metal hydride, will still, because it's a transverter, and it's borrowing power and running it back through that transverter. In doing that, you're only going to get about 3.5 watts out. And even if you put external power on it, you're just going to still be right in there at the 3 to 3.5 watts out, from what I've found.
And the second question I have from another user regarding the charging circuit on the KX3, because the KX2 doesn't have a charging circuit. Does the KX3 charging circuit charge other than, well, what flavors of rechargeable batteries does it charge?
Well, because the battery holder is limited to AA type batteries, the technology that's available currently in the AA technology, as far as I'm aware, is the nickel metal hydride for rechargeable, or the standard alkaline non-rechargeable, which you would not want to charge alkaline batteries. Bad things happen when you do that, so don't do that. But yeah, the nickel metal hydrides charge just fine in the radio, in place, and there's very little risk of fire or issue with this nickel metal hydride due to the chemistry.
Specifically, lithium ion and lithium ferrite potassium batteries should not be charged currently in the KX3.
That is correct.
Gotcha. Thank you.
While you're on the topic of the GEMS products, I think I forgot to mention at the top, but we'll throw it out now. Much like Elecraft, Elecraft is having specials on the KX line, whether it be a KX3, KX2, a PX3, or the AMP. There are show specials going on at the booth. Please visit the booth to get those show specials. They are only available through the end of business today. In addition to saving you some money on each of those products, for the lower 48 United States, it is free shipping as well. As far as my products go, I am offering a 10% off coupon if you use the coupon code QSO today, one word. Doesn't matter if it's upper or lowercase, but QSO today will get you 10% off of my products as well through the end of business today. Any other questions?
Some just came in, and I'm about to post the website and coupon code for everyone's convenience. No, just a pat on the back for doing a great job. In addition to the audio challenges, great material being presented. Thanks for your time. Thank you,
All right.
anonymous attendee.
Let's go over to the KX2, and again, some similarities and differences. We talked about the screen being the exact same size screen as the KX3. It is. It has the same display information on it as the KX3. You'll notice a few less knobs as well as a few less buttons in the shrunk down size. There is a KX3, the KX2. The KX2 case is roughly 1/2 the volume of this case. This radio weighs just over 2 pounds, fully operated and equipped. With the internal batteries, this weighs 13 ounces, a little under half the weight. So with that, this again, see if I got my battery plugged in. I do. It's a double button push. On the KX3, it was a double button push over here. On the KX2, it's a double button push right here. Reason for the double button push is if you were to put this into a soft bag or into your back, were to hit one of these keys or two buttons, it's not going to end up on your backpack while you're hiking in somewhere and have dead batteries. So anyway, there's how you turn this one on. There's the display. I do have the backlight on. I did not on the KX3. With that, you're able to get, do this again, turn it off. This radio, when we shrunk it down, it does not have RX IQ out. That is one of the features that was lost shrinking the size down, so you cannot add this to the PX3 pin adapter. On this end, again, you've got your power port, you've got your accessory, your key, phones, and your mic. The key is for your external key of your choice, and then you'll notice there's a little ground symbol down here. We're going to go back to this same piece of wire that I had earlier that I was using on that KX3. This is a mini banana plug. And all you do is press that right into that hole and string this 16 feet of counterpoise out. An antenna that's available from Elecraft is called the AX1, newly out, designed by Wayne Burdick and others, but Wayne was the lead on this. I worked with Wayne as we took some other antennas apart, kind of dissected them and figured out some likes and some dislikes of all of those. In doing that, they came up with the AX1. The AX1 is a 15, 17, and 20 meter tri-band antenna. There's a micro switch on the coil. I don't have one here with me. My move. So I don't have one to show you. Go to the website and take a look. But on the coil, there's a micro switch. In one position, it is 17 meters. In the other position, it is 15 and 20 meters. So you can just stick that on, telescope it up. And on this radio, one of the other features you have is a little tiny hole. I don't think you can see it here. Anyway, that is a microphone. So there is a built-in microphone on this. There is not on a KX3. Push the transmit button, talk directly into the radio with the antenna up like a walkie-talkie, throw the counterpoise on the ground. The beauty of the little banana plug is if you stepped on that, this will pull out without hurting anything on the radio. That was Wayne's idea, concept as a kid, and I'm sure he'll elaborate more on his talks of that he wanted a handheld HF transceiver that he could do pedestrian mobile with. This is where it came to fruition right here. So some of the differences on this radio, besides the size, using a few knobs and buttons on here, is this radio is 10 meters to 80 meters. So you'll lose 6 and you'll lose 160 on the other end. For the backpack world with the soda activators, myself in that field, it does not cause me any grief. On a mountaintop, I'm typically 12 meters through 40 meters is all I am on a mountaintop. 80 meters gets tough because I don't have enough room to put a big enough antenna up typically. And it takes more time, and I'm not on mountaintops too terribly long, mostly due to weather. We're going to talk about the batteries on here next. So again, there's a knurled nut on this end, knurled nut on this end, and all you do is undo those two little thumb screws, and this will separate in half. Now there is a wire between the speaker that I'm holding in my left hand, the top half, and the radio. You can disconnect it. There is a connection down in here. We'll get to it in just a second. If I just flop that over, there is the battery pack. This battery pack just unplugs, put the radio back together. Actually, while I'm in here, just take a look. So your basic circuit board in here, this is your antenna tuner. What this piece is here as an option. That is the only option on this radio that, well, no, there's two options. This is one of the two options you can put inside this radio. It's the antenna tuner here. This is the KXIO board for the KX2. We'll do that in just a second. Show you what those are. So on here, the little battery pack, this is about a 2600 milliamp or 2.6 amp hour battery pack. I'll flip that over, maybe you guys can read that a little bit better. Doug showed me a picture of one earlier. There's been a little bit of a change to the label that goes on here, but the battery pack is the same kind of composition. It's 3 cells. puts out about 11.5 volts at 2600 milliamp hours in here. And this plug on the inside of the radio is the exact same as on the end of the KX2, KX3, or the PX3. You can actually plug that in and operate the radio, the external battery pack as well. Now, the beauty of this is, let's say in the radio you had the battery in there and it was down to 9 volts. You've got a spare battery pack. You put that on, I don't know if it's more or less. Let's say it's fully charged at about 11. When you change over, and when you disconnect, it'll just go back to the internal battery if there is one, or if it has a sufficient charge, and just back to operating. The battery pack itself, as you see, is made by Turnigy. They're kind of in the RC car or RC radio control industry. Elecraft has gone to them, and these are great battery packs. I find I used to carry a bigger, heavier battery pack external with me as a backup. I have switched over, and I now carry 2 of these, one in the radio and one as backup for either the KX3 or the KX2, because they work seamlessly. This battery pack, or the 8 AA batteries, if I do a soda activation, I'm typically on a peak for about a half an hour to an hour. It is contest style, meaning I'm kind of a mini pileup when I'm up there, and I'm transmitting and receiving at about a 50% duty cycle. I am able to get 3 mountaintops activations, or about an hour and a half of operating. On the 8 AA's, I get about the same out of this battery pack here. I might actually get a little more out of this battery pack, because I've done 4 summits. This radio, I've done 3 summits in one day, where I climb a peak, activate, go down, relocate, climb a peak, activate, go down, relocate, climb a 3rd peak in one day, and did not change out the internal battery. Did have my spare with me, but I did not need it to do that type of activation. So really, there's a great amount of power in there. Both of these radios, you can go into the menu and you can turn off the backlight. You put headphones in here, and either the KX3 or the KX2, they have very similar architecture on the inside for how their power is consumed. And you're able to get this down to between 135 and 150 amps, milliamps, 135 to 150 milliamps of current draw on receive. That means you can sit and listen for hours and hours on this little battery pack at 150 milliamps. If you turn the speakers on and bring the volume up, turn the backlight on, you're still probably well under an amp on this radio or the KX3 to receive. So very thrifty on battery use. Competitors, similar small sized radios. Most of them are over 1 amp. There's one of them that's closer to 2 amps, and that's just on receive. You're going to go through batteries rapidly. On here, again, raised in panels, and you can kind of see, I want to get it right there, that your VFO knob is tucked down inside the top of those 2. So if this were to flip over and fall, it's going to give you protection for your display, for all of these knobs and buttons. And so it's kind of the first level of protection. This radio has not been dropped, fortunately, by me. That's my personal radio. This is also my personal radio, but you will notice on this in panel right here, there are some chips and dings. Those chips and dings, this was sitting on the hood of my Jeep, and it unfortunately slid off, hit the ground, and that is the damage I suffered, is just some paint scratching on this knob. The display, everything is just factory new, still looks perfect. So I highly recommend putting some kind of protection on your radio. This is what it is. In doing this, these end panels are heat treated aluminum, so they don't bend, even though this is kind of a small diameter here. It It's exactly the same on the pan adapter, and it's even more so on this one. Factory end panels are about 100 thousandths of an inch thick. So are these. These are heat treated aluminum. Again, they don't bend, even though there's a real small distance here. And that's the weak point there. So everything is done with thought in mind of this thing dropping and being able to protect your radio for it.
Scott,
On this radio, do you have a question, Doug?
a moment. How easy is it to change the VFO-A knobs on the KX2 and the KX3? And are those knobs available for both radios with the dimple and with the external bump?
Okay, great question. Yeah. So I only make an aftermarket for the KX2. To take it on and off, it is simply a press fit. So you just kind of pull and wiggle and it will come off, and there is your encoder. Put it back on. It's exactly the same process, and you just seat it and it's done. The KX3 is already, it's a beautiful knob. It's got the dimple already for your finger. It's got the rubber tire on the outside for traction, and it is an aluminum knob. It's also got a metal encoder shaft, and you have to slip the tire off, and there is a set screw in here. I don't make an aftermarket product for this.
A moment, please, Scott. A moment, please, Scott.
Making them, I will caution you, they're generally larger in diameter. May lose a couple here, lost in travels, but there is a second thumb screw here. Your factory radio comes with a leg on the back that is what I call the short leg. And when you set that up, it's kind of a triangle between this corner, and the back, and that'll tip the radio up enough that this key will work here and you'll have clearance underneath it. The KXPD3, the bigger paddles, will also go right on place just like they do the other radio. However, if you opt to use this, because they stick out further, your little leg, the short leg here, the factory leg, has got too much that these will hit. You'll need to lay it sideways, but you can use this key on it if you prefer that. One of the options that I also make, see it here, the factory leg is here and the taller leg, so kind of see them there, looks like an hour hand and looks like a minute hand on a clock. Well, they all operate off that one little thumb screw, the same, and you can tuck them both in, so you don't lose the functionality of the short leg, but you can add a taller leg. And the reason being is many people that had a KX3 to start with, the KX3 sits at about this angle, or KX2 sits at about that angle with the short leg from the factory. I wanted it to sit up a little taller, so I do offer the opportunity to put a tall leg on there as an option, and yet you don't lose the factory leg. You get to use them either one you want or none. Make the end panels, make the cover, make the VFO knob, and again, a paddle port cover that goes on this end. Those are the options I make. Plus the mount that captures these two thumb screws, this end and this end, and then it cradles off of these corners. Works exactly the same as the KX3 mount, except it only has one thumb catch centered over here. So I do offer that product as well. Doug, did you make it back with us? Oh,
I'm not sure who in my neighborhood is scarfing up all the bandwidth, but I'm back. Thanks.
okay, there you are. So anyway, those are the products, the similarities, the differences. Reality is, if you're going to be, if you're a backpacker, an outdoorsman, you want to travel a lot, you want to fly to destinations, this radio takes up a lot less space. It is my go-to radio, the KX2. However, you are losing 6 meters and 160 meters. No option for the VFO of 2 meters or 4 meters if you're in the European market. No roofing filter available on this. It is a digital filter only. It's a DSP with 32 bits processing that works very, very well, but it is not a ceramic roofing filter, much like the KX3 offers as an option. It does have DSP filtering in it as well without the roofing. They both offer the 9-to-1 antenna tuner on the inside. They both offer the KX IO board, which gives you a real-time clock. On this one, no charging because the battery has to come out. They partner with Turnigy, and you'll get a Turnigy charger as an option and be able to charge that battery externally if that's what you choose to run. If you don't want the Turnigy battery internal, you can opt for anybody's source of battery, and it just needs to terminate in a plug that will go in here. It's the same plug.
That's 2.1 millimeter concentric center hot.
Correct. That it is. I think that covers the entire line here. The amplifier, which I don't have, we'll kind of go over that a little bit. The amplifier is about the size of a small shoebox. Go to the website and take a look at it. The weight of it is about, off the top of my head, probably about 7 pounds. The cabling to either the KX3 or the KX2 is the same. You're going to use one of the accessory keys, and you're going to pick up the antenna off of this end, and you're going to turn off. If you have the antenna tuner installed in here, you'll turn that off because you're going to want to use the tuner in the amp if you opt for it, or an external amp. I'm sorry, an external tuner beyond the amplifier. The amplifier comes with ample cable to locate it a little ways away from here. You get the cabling package, and it seamlessly interfaces once you go in here, tell it you've got the amp, and you can now run 0 up to 100 watts on all bands. It works exactly the same way off of the KX2. Pick up an accessory port on this end and your antenna off of this end, plumb those into the amp, turn off this antenna tuner in the menu the exact same way, and again, you're 0 to 100 watts on all bands.
We have a question from the audience.
Go ahead.
Glenn wonders if you recommend using a heat sink when operating the KXP 100.
The amp will not need the radio's heatsink because even in a digital mode, for example, the most popular being FT8. I'm a little green in FT8, but I've been around many operators that use it with their amp. Generally, the KX3 is kind of the go-to radio that most people I've seen are running the FT8 on with the amp. And you can turn this down to 3 or 4 watts output on the radio. You're not going to generate that much heat, and the amp's going to do the heavy lifting. The amp has a series of fins that are about an inch tall, spaced very tightly. So there's lots and lots of surface area in there, and not having any issues with that from what I understand.
Thanks very much. No other questions at this time.
Okay. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up for me. I'll talk a little bit. Now, let me. Antennas. I prefer in-fed. Throw that out to folks. For mountain topping, in-feds go up and down very quickly. Are they the most efficient? Probably not. Dipoles I do like, but again, when you're on a very high mountain peak, typically you don't have a lot of real estate. One of my favorite mountain peaks here in Colorado is Mount Crested Butte. That summit is probably about 30 feet by 20 feet. It's just a spire of rock. And I put my pole out to the side and just let the wind drift my antenna back over to my radio. And anyway, that's kind of how I operate on a lot of those summits. If I've got the time and the space, we'll put up dipoles and use those. Again, on these, the antenna tuner keeps everything happy, and I run pretty small coax. I think the biggest coax I've ever ran on either of these radios is RG8X, and I keep it less than 50 feet, so I stay efficient that way, and I'm not carrying out loads and loads of heavy coax by operating. If you're going to operate, again, portable where you're backpacking, the smaller radio, you can use this as a home base station, the amp with it, and you'll get 10 through 80 meters. The KX3 is really suited well for doing, going to the park, running all the modes, all the bands, with the amp, without the amp, with the pan adapter, without the pan adapter, and you can use it as your home station very easily. The receiver in here, Rob Sherwood, at the time, I'm a little out of touch with where everything is recently, but the K3, when it came out, was near the very top. When the KX3 came out, it superseded the K3 in receive, which the architecture, and I'll let Doug correct me if I'm wrong here, but the architecture that they came up on the receiver for the KX3 kind of transferred right back into the K3S. And that was the enhanced sizer receiver in the K3S, which has now transferred and become the K4 with its incredible receiver that's coming out. The little KX2 has an outstanding receiver. I think it ranks just under the KX3, so it's very similar in receive, because if you can't hear them, you can't work them. So it's more similarities there. Those kind of an overview of them. I think that's all I've got. Doug, any questions come in?
At the current, nobody in the question and answer mode, and while there are a couple of us chatting in the back room, oh, there's a new one. Pete, the updates for a KX2 or a KX3 come out as customers give us feedback and we're able to make firmware improvements. By all means, if you would like a feature request, if you notice a repeating kind of a problem, let us know. Support@elecraft.com will bend a programmer's ear and say, here's what the customer says. We take that kind of feedback seriously. We like to hear field feedback from our customers. And that's where updates to our firmware come from. So if you have feedback for us, by all means, it's the only case where we really like radio feedback.
And I'll touch on that a little bit with the KX2. I am an early adopter of both the KX3 and the KX2. The KX3, when it came out, the firmware updates were kind of hot and heavy, fast and furious. Every few weeks to a couple of months, a new firmware update came out for probably the first couple of years. Again, very similar here in the KX2 line. The early adopters giving a lot of feedback, finding small issues or asking for enhancements, and I'll go over some of those in just a second. But really, the firmware updates are a piece of cake. You get either radio, you're going to get a programming cable that plugs into the program, to the PC connector here, goes into a USB to your computer, and you are able to download those firmware updates, squirt them in, and unlike maybe the Apple products where you can't go backwards, you can go backwards with Elecraft. So if you find that something they've done just isn't to your liking for whatever that personal reason might be, and you're on firmware revision 10, you can go back to 9 or 8 or 7, wherever you'd like to go. It does what you want it to do. But by all means, like Doug said, give the feedback to Elecraft, let them know, and they will tweak that firmware to do things. I can tell you, like I said, Wayne being one of the great engineers behind this and the driving force because he wanted a handheld pedestrian mobile radio. One of the features he's done on the KX2 through programming is when you plug your microphone in, you are able to not only just change frequency up and down and push to talk here, but there are a series of commands, double presses, long presses that you can do with these keys as well. Change band, change frequency, change mode, and you will get a CW ID letting you know that that has taken place. because he has put this in his backpack with the antenna sticking up, has this on a little shoulder, and he is able to send and receive Morse code. He's able to change band, change frequency, all with a handheld mic. In addition to that, there is logging in this for CW, and you can do recording and logging inside the firmware that's inside this. I'm told that that same update is forthcoming at some point into the KX3 line because it has the same capability to house that and facilitate that. The microphone is exactly the same on both radios, so nothing would be too different there. So there's kind of an update on the firmware. One other item that I've got is everything except for the KX2 comes in two versions when you order it. There is factory assembled or there is a kit version. All kit versions require no soldering, and it's separating out small pieces of hardware, your boards, identifying things. The Elecraft manuals are absolutely incredible. They're laid out spectacular. You can go step one through whatever it needs to get your assembly, check off the boxes, do them in order, and it'll walk you through putting it together. The KX3, I built my KX3, and it took maybe 2.5 hours to put this together. Again, no soldering. Only small thing that you have to do besides putting screws in sockets and putting the nut in place occasionally is you will disconnect the BNC. You'll connect a tap wire on there to zero beat the VFO. It probably took longer to explain it than to actually do it. It's just not difficult at all. I highly recommend that. Should you ever have something spectacular, and they will, you send your radio into the Elecraft hospital, if you will, and the doctors there take great care of your radio, get it all back functioning, test everything out, even above and beyond anything that you may have identified, and get it back to you in a very timely fashion. The KX2 is a factory assembled only, and it deals with the boards being so tight in here. There's just not a lot of room to work with where you've got that in the KX3 or the PX3 or the AMP or the K3 and eventually the K4 will be offered in the kit version as well. But this one is factory assembled only. However, you are able to put in the KX IO board because it just moves right up here on that end by your battery pack. And the antenna tuner, you could add that as a later option if you choose to. It's easy to access and get in there. So hopefully that answers some questions you might have. What's available there? Doug, we have any other questions?
I am finding no more questions, and we are just past the 1 hour mark.
Okay, well, we will wrap this up so the next presenter can get set up and do their part so they're ready to go. I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks for spending the hour with us here. I hope I've given you the information that maybe you were looking for. If not, elecraftsupport.com. They'll take care of you there. You can send it over to me, Jim's Products. I will answer what I can, and if I can't, I'll get you in touch with the right people at Elecraft as well. We definitely want to make sure everybody is taken care of and gets the answers that they're looking for. So thanks for your time, Doug. Thanks for being the co-host and helping me out today.
Always a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. So thanks to everybody, and I think we'll wrap this up.